Thomas, the lineup of brilliant guests continue with our next one, Peter Rentschler, of course, CEO over at Metafora, one of the smartest men in the space, and we're excited to have him on this morning. Peter, thanks so much for joining us.
Anthony, you are way too kind.
Peter, it's always a good day whenever we get to have you on. I'm always excited to talk to you and chat with, someone from the consulting background, and I'm excited about today's topic because whenever we worked with clients, they always want to know, even though we're in October, what's next, what's around the corner. So that's exactly what we're talking about now, what to expect in 2023.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've obviously been having a lot of conversations with our clients. It's kind of annual budgeting and planning season. Folks are thinking about how to invest their money next year, especially with inflation rates rising. What are going to be the impacts to your business plans and strategies? And I think we've seen a number of trends. I think, first and foremost, we are seeing that valuations are starting to fall. We've had 15 years of low interest fueled growth, and businesses that are valued on discounted cash flows are going to look more valuable when it's a 0% discount applied versus a 6 to 10% discount applied in line with inflation and interest rates. And so those businesses are going to look less valuable. And so you're going to start to see kind of less private equity investment in the space. We've seen from a number of our customers and private equity firms that we work with that are pulling back and changing the way that they look at making those investments. And ultimately, that's also going to lead to an increase in consolidation. We've seen so many strategic investments, but also a lot of private equity-backed deals. There have been a lot of businesses that have grown during COVID and in the last 18 to 24 months that are looking to go to market, whereas historically those may have gone to a private equity buyer that wanted to get into the space, buy as a platform, and then do roll-ups. I think we're going to start to see a lot more strategic acquisitions happening where the bigger players are going to suck up the smaller players.
And speaking of valuations, we're looking at ratios and stuff. Now with interest rates and the party appearing to stop, courtesy of the Fed, what does that look like? What does a good company look like now? It feels like things are being turned upside down almost, given the changing macro environment.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I still rely heavily on the business fundamentals. I think for a while, and in a low interest rate environment, revenue growth is what matters the most. And now, it almost kind of looks like we're almost starting to look like the 70s, where you have high interest rates and free cash flow is way more important to businesses. And so, as a company, whereas the last 10 years you were rewarded for hyper growth rates, even if that was at the expense of profitability, we're seeing a lot more focus and emphasis on the profitability and free cash flow generation of a business. And that's, there are lots of levers that you can pull to move your business in that direction as well.
Peter, I think that's a great point. And the other thing that kind of comes to my mind is really being innovative. So when I think of the last couple of years, there were all these, some freight tech companies that came to the market, and a lot of them kind of looked to solve some of the same issues, or maybe they didn't really make an innovative way to go about it. And I think the market was allowing that because there was such a time for growth and need in the space. Do you see the standards of what's truly innovative and what your true purpose is in the marketplace being a little bit more strict as we get into the next year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I believe that businesses, particularly technology providers, need to be laser focused on the problem that they're solving. And it's not just, hey, the problem that we're solving makes your business better. There needs to be quantified ROI on the investment. We talk a lot as I was talking about how there's going to be more of a focus on the profitability of a business. One of the top levers that you can pull is investing in new technology to drive automation. I mean, we've seen wages increase tremendously since the beginning of the pandemic. Inflation is part of that, but it's still largely an employee market. And so, one of the levers that businesses can pull and that leaders can pull is investing in technology that allows them to mitigate some of the increased costs of wages and of doing business. And so from a software company technology provider perspective, you really need to be laser focused on the value prop that you provide and the expected ROI for your customers of implementing your technology. Because that's, in our experience, businesses are still spending money and investing. They're just being a little bit more selective about where they spend their money. And there needs to be a clearer return on the investment as opposed to kind of a longer term hypothetical, kind of soft benefit, if you will.
You mentioned also a lot of investment in automation, but it also appears there's now more investment on, workers, quality of workers, perks because of the labor market. How do you see this? Is there the potential that we may return to the early 80s and 90s where we bring in a new breed of consultant to help improve the quality of life for the actual employees within the organization, not just the business process itself?
Yeah, I mean, whether someone brings in consultants to help with that or not is certainly up to the business leaders, and it's certainly something we do a lot of work around. But I still fundamentally believe that it's an employee's market for the time being, and I think it will be, particularly in the white collar jobs that make up a lot of the transportation and logistics space. Ultimately, the leaders that are investing in developing their people and defining career paths and career development, investing in company culture, flexible work schedules, the ability to work remotely. I believe that those are the companies that will win and attract the best talent. I mean, I'm still seeing employees accept lower paying jobs because the job allows them to work remotely, or there's a flexible work schedule, or there's a great company culture that allows them where there's a clear career path for development for the individual employee. And I still believe that a lot of those are the kind of qualitative differentiators that leaders can focus time, energy, and money on to ultimately build a better business. And in a world where investment and spend maybe under more of a microscope, a lot of the things that I just talked about around building a company culture and defining clear career paths for your employees are relatively low investment, low cost, high impact initiatives for business leaders.
And Peter, while on that topic of investment, let's talk about the other aspect of it, and that's around investing in technology. And one of the big things, of course, wages continue to start to steadily increase into the next year, just to kind of keep up with the pace of inflation, bringing on more workers sometimes a little bit more expensive. Do you think an ongoing investment in automation and technology to really ease some of those labor wages will be a pretty big thing happening in the next year?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a no-brainer. We've been ringing this bell for 2 years that if the early months of the pandemic made it very clear the businesses that had invested in technology and were nimble enough to shift their business models as a result of the pandemic, and those businesses grew exponentially throughout COVID. And so this is just another reason as to why it's so important to invest in technology that drives automation, that allows your carrier sales reps to go from managing or covering 5 loads a day to 10 loads a day to 20 loads a day. It allows your sales folks to manage more customers. It allows your operations team members or your dispatchers to manage a bigger fleet or more trucks or more drivers. As much as you can invest in technology that allows your team to do more work without running them into the ground, those are the businesses that are going to win, because ultimately, not only are they investing in technology that drives automation, but you're also creating a better employee experience. I mean, we've worked with companies where they had employees resign or leave because the technology was so clunky and hard to work with, and it made their jobs difficult. I mean, it's another differentiator for creating a great employee experience.
Thank you so much. One more rapid fire question here. More or less M&A coming up into the next year?
Ooh, more.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think there's going to be more. Maybe with a little bit of a different dynamic. Not so instead of there being, 20 buyers for every company, there might be 5. But I believe that there are a lot of founders that are 5-10 years into a growth story that are looking to move on, and there are also still private equity backed businesses and publicly traded businesses that have growth commitments that they have to make, and ultimately inorganic growth is going to be a part of those strategies.
Awesome, Peter. Well, this has been insightful as always, and I'm sure you've provided a lot of nuggets of information for a lot of business leaders and those involved in this space watching right now. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, y'all. Really appreciate it.
Right now, we're going to toss over to our next hit for today's headlines.